What to do, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut project by Kisses for Kings. Basically, this project is called Forget to Remember, and it came out in the spring of 2010. So the thing about this particular project is it has a hit song on here, one of the singles that was written by Deuce. And this is definitely around the time that he was kind of mildly affiliated still with Hollywood Undead as far as that kind of happens. It's basically the song called The Only Ones. This is a song that Jackal Goldcake recently had shown me, and I was interested to see what they're about, and I kind of wondered about it. But I'd have to say, these are kind of, this is like a sub venture for like Tony Lovato. He has a rock band called Mess that he was kind of messing with around this time. Kind of, I mean, they retired like supposedly in like 2006, but they came back for a little bit in the early 2010s. But they're basically a rock band of like the late 90s to about the early 2010s as far as that kind of happens. But Tony Lovato, kind of with some other affiliates, kind of did this particular project and called it Kisses for Kings. Now they were kind of in cahoots with Hollywood Undead, which is pretty dope to kind of see that. And they were also kind of in cahoots with Craig Mabbitt of Escape the Fate, which is pretty interesting. Definitely a pretty punkish kind of album. I definitely like the concept about it. This is just a good kind of meshing of like alternative rock. And I would definitely say if you like Hollywood Undead with just a little bit more punk flavoring, I would have to say this Kisses for Kings project is a pretty good one to kind of have here. I just would have to say one of the songs that's on here, the only ones with Deuce on it, just really has like the cadence of Deuce right down to a T. I would have to say this really does feel like something that he completely did, and it just feels like it probably should have had Deuce on there. Supposedly it was for the second Hollywood Undead album back when Deuce was going to be a part of it, but I would have to say it's interesting enough because that really sounds like a really kind of moody, kind of Japanese anime type punk song, I would have to say. It really sounds like a Japanese anime credits type punk song as far as that kind of happens. Just a real nice one to kind of get there. But I just like the concept of this particular project. Has a good assortment of stuff. I mean, this is not a classic project, but it does have a good assortment of ones. Out of 6 songs on here, I wound up recommending to you 3, so I'd have to say. So I'll go ahead and recommend those 3 real quick. So basically, the 3 songs I recommend would be The Only Ones with Johnny Three Tears, Ignore the End with Craig Mabbitt of Escape the Fate, and then Don't Fall Away. So some of these songs, particularly a pretty good highlight on here is The Only Ones, and this is the song that was written by Deuce and that type of stuff that was originally intended for Hollywood Undead. This is the most popular song according to Spotify off this project, I would have to say, and I just would have to say this is kind of a dreary, kind of drizzling day, kind of makeshift tune. I would definitely feel like it's some vintage. This is some vintage kind of 2010s workaday type feels, I would have to say, and it's just a good Deuce written kind of bop. So like I was saying, this just really feels like a Japanese anime kind of credit. So like I was saying, this just really feels like a Japanese anime kind of credit song, something like that. Just really feels like a rainy day, just watching the rain on like the window pane, something like that. Just a real kind of breezy, kind of moody, just really kind of dreary, kind of drizzling, moody type feel as far as that kind of happens. This really feels like a hit that could have been really soaring if it had been a part of Hollywood Undead. I think if Hollywood Undead would have done this song, I think it probably would have charted because this just had a lot of star power and commercial bite about it. It's real nice amount of appeal in like an alternative sense. It's the classic stuff that Deuce was on kind of in 2009, 2010 as far as that kind of went. So it's just a nice one to kind of have. And then probably the second best song on this particular album, just an overall highlight, would be Ignore the End with Craig Mabbitt. This is definitely a nice one. This is kind of a paced kind of evening thriller, I would have to say. It's an evening thriller. I would have to say it's a moody kind of tasks done. This is kind of a moody tasks done kind of day after hours haze. Definitely, I just would have to say this is an exciting kind of unwind cut. So this is definitely this is probably one of the most riveting songs in the album in terms of stepping out and getting ready to have some crunk times as far as that kind of happens. Just a definite one to kind of get excited to and get ready to step out for the night as far as that kind of happens. This has a real nice snappy kind of pace, and just overall this one just kind of has like a chugging riff in the verses that just kind of gives it like a good amount of thrills as far as that kind of happens. Definitely, this one's kind of moody. This one's moody like The Only Ones also, but this one's just a little bit more kind of steadfast and a little bit more industrial. I would have to say was just another highlight. I really like the Craig Mabbitt hook on here. I really don't know him that well, but I would have to say it's just a good variation to kind of have some extra stuff on here as far as that kind of happens. They both do good on the song. And the third of 3 highlights I recommend on this particular album is Don't Fall Away. So this is kind of a brushy, kind of cool breeze, mid-tempo snap of a song, I would have to say. Definite nice one. This song has a moody backdrop feel, definitely. I like the concept of this particular one, and this is just a nice rumination cut for fall, I would have to say. So this is a pretty good autumn bop, just a real kind of bristly, kind of brushy, kind of autumn breeze of a song, I would have to say. Just a nice cool breeze kind of tune. Definitely like the snappiness of this particular one. This works as a real nice mid-tempo one, just in that sort of vibey kind of feel as far as that kind of happens. Just a nice one to kind of have is like an extra kind of feel. I feel like this is a good companion almost to The Only Ones. I would have to say The Only Ones is a little bit more kind of just dreary and drizzling, I would have to say, but this is definitely one that just kind of works in that same sort of moody pitch, just in a different day. This one's just kind of more of like an overcast day, where Only Ones is more of like a rainy day, but they both work for like some good kind of just like ruminating in like the autumn as far as that kind of happens. I would have to say it's just some good concepts for that. And then Ignore the End is just kind of a chugging kind of, and Ignore the End is just kind of a chugging along, kind of snappy, kind of rock heavy type one that just works real well. So that's a nice one. So talk about the three other songs on this album that I didn't recommend. Basically, On Your Own, My Mother Said, and These Streets are all kind of more just like on the other side of the coin type feels, as far as just having a little bit more productive and homely type feels, as far as just like a more kind of optimistic type mode. I feel like these three songs lose all of their moodiness and just kind of have like a more productive and kind of peppy sense that just doesn't really fit the fold as far as what I've seen. I mean, if there had been more moments to kind of distinguish to see if they could really pull it off, I might have said more. But for the most part, they didn't have enough strengths to really distinguish the concept of having like different shades. I mean, it's not like the different. Kind of feel like these more productive and kind of optimistic type angles just didn't work out for them quite as well. I'd have to say it's interesting that they did try some new stuff as far as that kind of happens, but in an EP, when you don't like the new stuff that they try as far as like the angles that they did try that worked, like some of these moody type ones and these kind of dreary drizzling type tunes, and some of these dreary drizzling type tunes like The Only Ones and Ignore the End and some of those type ones and Don't Fall Away, they definitely work in that sort of moody kind of like just sullen kind of pitch. But I just kind of look at the concept. Some of these other ones just didn't quite hit the nails quite as well as they needed to. So that's this kind of concept about it. I kind of looked after it. I would have liked to have seen more strengths, but I really feel like this was just kind of like a sub venture that was just kind of like very ephemeral and just not meant for long term. At least at the time, it didn't seem long term. I mean, obviously, because this is still to this day the only project that they did, it just felt like a very short term kind of situation. It's just kind of like a decent sub venture, but it just didn't have like I was kind of looking, it just kind of felt like a stopgap more so than anything else. This is kind of the concept. I look after it. Not to say that this project is wholesomely bad. It just didn't build upon the strengths and develop some new ones apart from like the main strengths that they had with like the Deuce writing and then the Escape the Fate writing and some of those type ones that just had the bigger guests and those type moody. Like some of the moments that just had some bigger guests and just overall moody type feels that just fit them better as far as that kind of happens. But I just would have to say, so me basically recommending 3 songs out of 6 on here. I'm going to go ahead and give this EP like a 5.75 out of 10. Like I do feel like they have some good moments as far as that kind of happens, but this just kind of feels like very low key and underground to the point where it just feels like not every single folk, and even like the folks that do find this project would probably only definitely say like even the folks that probably do find this project would probably only like the single, like The Only Ones with Johnny Three Tears. It just would feel like that's probably the one that would get the bread at the like the popularity kind of as it was on Spotify, with that one being the only song that's in the millions of plays or really anything over 100,000. I would have to say that's just kind of the concept. I look after it. 5.75 is pretty decent. It's good enough to kind of fetch going out to getting it and purchasing it and getting a listen out of it. There are 3 songs worth talking about, but it's just kind of the concept of it. But the social score, I'm going to go ahead and give the social score like a 6.25 out of 10. I feel like it has some good social appeal, but it doesn't really have like a night out kind of song apart from Ignore the End. I feel like that's really about the only one. But the Do song is really excellent. Just a real kind of moody, affable type tune that this is very infectious. And then Don't Fall Away is like some good autumn kind of ruminating that just has a real kind of hit brushy kind of feel as far as that kind of happens. So it's kind of the concept about it, but there's just not a ton of moments. This is a brief project, but it just doesn't build upon further strengths to kind of see what this band could have been. It just really feels like a stopgap that was just like a one-time type thing as far as that kind of went. But yeah, this is kind of thing. I want to say that they had some other songs on like their MySpace or something like that, like a song with M Shadows, which I forget where he's from. He was from some rock band. I don't remember the band that M Shadows was a part of, but there were some ones that were kind of on their MySpace and that type of stuff. So it's interesting, but it's too bad that we didn't get more projects from them. But yeah, I would say 6.25 social. In terms of the future, like that's what I was saying. So there's not really other stuff by Kisses for Kings. In terms of future, like I was saying, there's not really other stuff by Kisses for Kings. This is kind of their one and done type project. I do think, if I guess if you were to look on YouTube, you might be able to find some of the songs they did on MySpace and that type of stuff. But other than that, I'd have to say that's pretty much it. But this is kind of worth a purchase. But I'd say this EP is kind of worth a purchase in some senses, but it's kind of subpar. And like the Deuce song and the Craig Mabbitt song are basically like the best moments. So yeah.